Every business has unique needs. Perhaps your business needs a better way to manage cash flow, help protect against fraud, or efficiently bank online. Or maybe you're on a roll and ready to expand. Whatever your business needs, Atlantic Union Bank pairs modern technology with knowledgeable bankers dedicated to making banking for your business easier. Call, visit us online, or drop into an Atlantic Union Bank branch today. Atlantic Union Bank. Any way you bank.
Tires matter. They're the only part of your vehicle that touches the road. Tread confidently with new tires from Tire Rack. Whether you're looking for expert recommendations or know exactly what you want, Tire Rack makes it easy. Fast, free shipping, free road hazard protection, and convenient installation options. Go to TireRack.com to see tire test results, tire ratings, and consumer reviews, and be sure to check out all the special offers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.
Bob Evans' creamy mac and cheese and buttery mashed potatoes are made for those holiday moments you just can't plan for. Like when the neighbors burnt their holiday meal and you invited them over. Or that time when everyone's flights home were canceled and they stayed an extra 2 days. So when there is no plan, say hello to Plan B.O.B. When you bring out the Bob, you can take comfort this holiday season knowing you'll always have something delicious on the table no matter what the holidays bring. When you need comfort, bring out the Bob. Available now in your refrigerated section.
Lowe's knows that saving is always top of mind, especially this season. That's why we've picked some great deals for early Black Friday. Get free select DeWalt, Cobalt, or Craftsman tools when you buy a select battery or combo kit. More tools? Why not? Plus, we've got select pre-lit artificial Christmas trees starting at $59.98 because it's never too early to think Christmas. Get Black Friday prices without the crowds. Lowe's, we help, you save. While supplies last, selection varies by location.
At Capella University, we believe accessible education can make a difference. That's why we offer scholarship opportunities to all eligible students. Un futuro diferente está más cerca de lo que crees con Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Today's episode will touch on sensitive topics, such as birth trauma, miscarriage, and gambling addiction. So if you are sensitive to this content, please listen at your own discretion. What is art without the muse? Many of Western art's most famous works are depictions of women. But who were these women? Do they have their own stories to share with the world? Hello and welcome to ArtMuse, a podcast that aims to reshape the ways in which we interpret well-known works of art by paying dues to the women whose images have been immortalized but whose names and stories have been wrongfully overlooked. While these women's faces are familiar to viewers around the world, their identities have been largely forgotten. Together, we will explore the important lives and legacy of the female muse and appreciate these works of art from a new perspective, through the eyes of the women whose image stares back at us. Is the muse in actuality just as, if not more, important than the artists themselves? And I'm your host, Grace Anna. Welcome to part 2 of our 2-part episode on Mary Robinson. In part 1, we explored Mary's broody childhood in Bristol, her father's abandonment of their family, and her eventual move to London with her mother. We then explored Mary's unfortunate marriage to Thomas Robinson, their time spent imprisoned at the Fleet, and upon their release, Mary's ascension to stardom as an actress of Covent Garden. We left things off in our story just after the rise and fall of Mary's relationship with the Prince of Wales, and her vow to herself to enact her revenge upon him in any way she could. And that year, her revenge would come in the form of 4 portraits painted by England's leading portraitess. Between the years of 1781 and 1782, Mary was painted by George Romney, Thomas Gainsborough, John Hopner, and Sir Joshua Reynolds. 3 of these 4 portraits were set to be exhibited at that year's upcoming annual exhibition at the Royal Academy, and would stand as visual reminders of both Mary's beauty and resilience. As the Wallace Museum rightfully points out on their website, despite the public humiliation of the prince's abandonment of her and her dire financial situation, Mary launched her public comeback by means of 3 portraits for public exhibition. Though Mary no longer had the prince's heart, she did still have her youth, health, and devastatingly good looks, and she would be sure to put them on full public display as retribution. The first of her portraits painted during this time was by the renowned portraitist George Romney. Mary began sitting for Romney just 2 weeks after the prince suddenly broke things off with her, and their sessions continued over the next few months. Because Mary was already deep in debt, she could not afford to commission a portrait by one of London's leading painters. Instead, Mary and Romney came to an agreement. Romney would paint Mary's portrait for free if he could advertise it in his studio to draw in new customers. Since Mary was notorious in the public eye, her portrait would be recognizable to any wealthy woman passing through Romney's studio, and would hopefully entice them to commission their own portrait. It was a win-win for both artist and sitter. Mary could self-promote a better image of herself after being dragged through the mud by the press, and Romney could attract well-to-do clients. In Romney's portrait of Mary, finished in the summer of 1781, we find Mary seated with her arms crossed across her waist. In her hands, she holds a fur muff, and she is garbed in a conservative dress, topped with a white lace cap. Though the press was hypersexualizing Mary through offensive and over-the-top caricatures, here Mary has refashioned herself almost like a Quaker, traditional, matronly, and dignified. Despite her public humiliation, Mary is unafraid to meet our stare directly. It is almost as if, with her serious expression and ever so slightly raised eyebrow, she is challenging our perception of her. In Romney's portrait, Mary makes clear that she is not the promiscuous and foolhardy girl the press has painted her out to be, but rather a strong, independent, and respectable woman that is not to be messed with. As we will soon discuss, Romney's portrait of Mary was one of the 3 exhibited in the Royal Academy exhibition of 1782. Within a few months of its completion, Mary's portrait was widely copied through engravings and distributed across London. Mary later wrote in her memoirs that Romney's portrait was among her favorite paintings of herself, and it seems it was one of Romney's favorite works as well, as the painter kept Mary's portrait with him until his death in 1802. The second portrait of Mary painted in this same period was by the famed portraitist Thomas Gainsborough. Titled Mrs. Mary Robinson and completed in 1782, Gainsborough's portrait of Mary was actually commissioned by the prince. It is perplexing, to say the least, that the prince would commission a portrait of Mary after not only brutally breaking up with her, but whilst he was in the midst of negotiating her payout. Scholars have speculated that the prince may have wanted a souvenir from his time with Mary, a token of their steamy affair, which after all he only ended at his father's request. It is perhaps for this reason that Gainsborough has depicted Mary as Perdita, the role she played on that fateful night that the prince first laid eyes on her. Here, Mary as Perdita sits cross-legged amongst a luscious pastoral landscape. Stormy clouds envelop the sky, clouds that seem to reflect Mary's own inner gloom. To her right is a small dog, her loyal companion, there to comfort her aching heart. She is dressed in a beautiful gown, corseted with a large blue bow and fitted with delicate ruffles. Around her neck is a black ribbon, which frames her perfectly blushed face. Her expression is both reflective and melancholic, as if she is caught in a moment of deep and serious contemplation. Like Perdita, which translates to the lost one, here Mary reflects on all that she has recently lost. Not only her royal lover, but also his financial support. To drive this connection, in her right hand, Mary clasps a miniature portrait, presumably the portrait of the prince that he gifted her at the start of their affair. As Paula Byrne eloquently wrote, "The painting is a clear evocation of Mrs. Robinson's abandonment. She is Perdita, the lost one, the pensive and thoughtful shepherdess, alone in a melancholic romantic landscape that is painted dreamily." Yet interestingly, despite the fact that the prince commissioned the work, Gainsborough seems to imply, through his sympathetic depiction of Mary, that she is perhaps not the lost one after all. As a contemporary critic wrote, Gainsborough dramatizes Mary's beauty, sensitivity, sexuality, expressing his own feelings about her, and offering the prince visual evidence that he has made a mistake in casting her off. Gainsborough certainly forces the question of whether it is Mary or the prince who in the end has lost more. For Mary, Gainsborough's portrait was once again an opportunity for her to change the public narrative surrounding her breakup with the prince. Here, Mary subtly implies that she is ready to move on from the prince, and she is no longer in need of his affection. Though Gainsborough entered the painting to be included in the Royal Academy exhibition, initial reviews caught on to Gainsborough's sympathies towards Mary, and he decided to remove the painting to save the prince from public embarrassment. Instead, as a token of his allegiance to Mary, Gainsborough gifted Mary a small oval portrait of her, which she kept with her as her most treasured belonging for the rest of her life. Mary was also captured on canvas in 1782 by the young and rising painter John Hoppner. Unlike Romney and Gainsborough, Hoppner was around Mary's own age and was from a similar modest background. It is not known who commissioned Hoppner's portrait, and it does not seem to have been included in the Royal Academy exhibition. Nonetheless, Hoppner's portrait of Mary is one of the most ravishing from this period. In Hoppner's portrait, Mary sits before a brilliantly red curtain, a salute to her successful career as an actress. She is garbed in a low corseted dress, with an enormous feathered hat to match. Hoppner's portrait of Mary is certainly her most seductive, and here Mary's bewitching beauty is put on full display. Her glistening pink lips, youthful rosy cheeks, and luminous skin all work to lure us in and tempt us, and it is no wonder that Mary was considered the most beautiful woman of her day. Hoppner's portrait of Mary now hangs at the Chawton House in Hampshire. Lastly, in 1782, Mary was painted by the celebrated portraitist Sir Joshua Reynolds. Modeled off of a portrait by Peter Paul Rubens of his wife Hélène Formant, Reynolds paints Mary seated with her arms cradled across her chest. She wears a stylish lace dress and imposing felt hat, brimmed with ostrich feathers. As in her other portraits, here Mary meets our stare directly and glares at us with an intense and unfaltering gaze. She seems unimpressed by our presence, emphasized by her slightly pursed lips and raised eyebrows. As in Romney's portrait, Mary seems to almost be daring us to a challenge, reminding us that she is far more than first meets the eye. Though Reynolds' portrait of Mary is still today considered amongst his finest, one of his pupils once famously said that his portrait of Mary was a complete failure because the extreme beauty of the sitter was beyond Reynolds's power. Reynolds himself must have not thought the painting was a total failure, for he kept the painting with him in his studio until he died a decade later. Reynolds's portrait, along with Romney's and Gainsborough's, were all set to be exhibited at the Royal Academy Exhibition of 1782. The Royal Academy Exhibition began in 1769 and took place in London every summer. It is today still the largest open submission exhibition in the UK and accepts artworks from across the mediums by both established and emerging artists. Because it was open to the public, exhibiting your work or your portraits at the Royal Academy Annual Exhibition was an excellent way to capture society's attention, and in Mary's case, rewrite her narrative in the press. Even though Gainsborough eventually removed his portrait of Mary from the exhibition, her portraits by both Romney and Reynolds received rave reviews. Mary quickly gained back her reputation in the public's eye and climbed to new heights of fame and celebrity. Though the prince had done his best to humiliate Mary, she came out of that year's Royal Academy exhibition with her head held high, more confident now than she had ever been. To celebrate her renewed popularity, Mary decided to travel to Paris shortly after the exhibition's close. In Paris, she not only made a splash amongst the French public, but also with Marie Antoinette, who was greatly impressed by Mary's fashion sense. When Mary returned to London a few weeks later, she not only brought with her a whole new wardrobe in the latest Parisian style, but the friendship of Marie Antoinette herself. One of the dresses that Mary brought back was actually modeled off of a dress originally worn by Marie Antoinette. The dress, which was white and loose-fitting, almost resembled a nightgown. When Mary wore the dress for the first time in public that October, it caused a sensation within the fashion world. Instead of tight and corseted dresses, Mary was among the first to wear such a free-flowing dress in England. The dress was an instant success, and almost overnight it became so popular that every woman in London wanted her own. It was eventually renamed the Perdita chemise, and the dress was beloved for more than just its comfortable fit. It became a symbol of female emancipation. As Paula Byrne wrote, "The dress was seen as freeing, and freedom of dress was a form of female liberation, and Mary Robinson would become an ardent supporter of the theory." Because the dress was popular amongst women of all classes, it was also revolutionary in that it made it near impossible to distinguish women from the upper and lower classes. As Paula Byrne continued, Mary's new dress made it hard to identify women's social standing from their appearance, providing a sense of social class liberation on top of female liberation. Now back in the public's good graces and glorified not only as a socialite but as a fashion icon, Mary must have felt like she was on top of the world. Once again, her every move was covered by the press, and cheering crowds swarmed around her at every public appearance. But word on the street was that Mary was not the only rising social celebrity in town. A young and handsome soldier had just returned from the American War of Independence and was causing a sensation within London social circles. And soon this dashing young soldier would become more than just someone to share the spotlight with. But little did Mary know, he would completely capture her heart and become the greatest love of her life. We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
Here for the Lowe's early Black Friday deals? You're right on time for some of our biggest savings. We're talking up to 50% off select major appliances, plus up to an extra 25% off when you bundle select major appliances. Holiday lights going up soon? Select ladders are up to 50% off right now. Get Black Friday prices without the Black Friday crowds. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 11/19. Selection varies by location. Select locations only. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
At Capella University, we believe accessible education can make a difference. That's why we offer scholarship opportunities to all eligible students. Un futuro diferente está más cerca de lo que crees con Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Hey neighbor, this holiday season, Birch Lane is here to help you celebrate with friends and family. From guest-ready dining tables to cozy sofas that fit the whole crew, our classic furniture and decor are crafted to last. And with fast, free delivery, you can be ready for holiday hosting in days, not weeks. So you can spend time on what matters most. It's classic style for joyful living. Shop Birch Lane, a Wayfair specialty brand at birchlane.com.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. Bannister Tarleton was born in 1754 in Liverpool into a slave-trading family who made their money through the transportation of slaves and sugar. When he was 21 years old, Tarleton enrolled in the army and was sent to America to fight on England's behalf in the American Revolutionary War. His fearlessness and natural skills as a soldier quickly caught the attention of his higher-ups, and Tarleton was soon promoted to lieutenant colonel. Tarleton was a particularly vicious fighter and became notorious for the many violent atrocities he committed against the Americans. Despite his brutality, Tarleton was celebrated in England as one of the few positives to come out of what was otherwise a failure of a war. He became an almost romanticized figure that England clung onto as a symbol of their undying power and resilience. When Tarleton returned to London, he became a social phenomenon. He was on the front page of every newspaper and gloated as a national hero. Mary would have inevitably heard all about Tarleton and his fame as a courageous English soldier. She also may have heard the rumors that Tarleton had a liking for both gambling and women. This, however, did not seem to deter her when Mary officially met Tarleton at Sir Joshua Reynolds' studio. We know from Reynolds' surviving studio diary that Mary and Tarleton sat for portraits at the same time. We also know that Mary came to Reynolds' studio for 11 different sitting appointments, which would have given her ample time to get to know Tarleton. Reynolds' full-length portrait of Tarleton was shown at the Royal Academy exhibition and was lauded alongside Mary's portrait as one of the best works in the entire exhibition. And just a few months after the exhibition's close, Mary officially began an affair with Tarleton. Soon Mary and Tarleton were seen attending galas and public events together. Tarleton was the perfect rebound after her breakup with the prince. If she couldn't be with the heir to the throne, then she would be with England's hottest national war hero. But interestingly, Mary was not monogamous with Tarleton at first. Around the same time that she became romantic with Tarleton, Mary also became involved with the older politician Charles James Fox. Fox had been a longtime member of Parliament. Over his years in government, Fox became more and more involved with the Whig Party, and eventually became the party's leader. Because of this, he was often referred to as the man of the people. But as admirable as his politics were, Fox was also known for his excessive drinking and gambling, as well as his insatiable hunger for women. In fact, it was often joked that Fox took a new mistress more frequently than he took a bath. We can imagine this bothered Mary little, as she herself was still seeing Tarleton throughout the course of their fling. In fact, it seems that Fox even tried persuading Tarleton to walk away from Mary so that he could have her all to himself, but to no avail. As Tarleton wrote in a letter, "Fox is now my rival with the lady. Fox will not be so fortunate with his association. I shall ever applaud the Perdita as the most generous woman on earth." Though Mary enjoyed her fun with Fox, after a few weeks she did decide to end their affair and commit to Tarleton fully. Once Mary and Tarleton became official, they quickly became London's most beloved celebrity couple, and the press could not get enough of their relationship. By that December, Mary and Tarleton were rarely seen apart. In the afternoon, they took daily rides through London's parks, and in the evenings, they danced together at masquerades and balls. Though her relationship with Tarleton may have begun as a fling, Mary was quickly falling in love with him, and her entire demeanor would light up in his presence. After her heartbreak over the Prince of Wales, Mary had finally found her true Prince Charming. As the Morning Herald wrote of her at this time, "The Perdita is so much improved that she scarcely retains a resemblance of her former self." But sadly, like Robinson, Tarleton had a nasty habit for gambling and quickly squandered his pay from the military. He eventually had no choice but to ask his family to bail him out of his accumulating debt. Unfortunately, his family did not approve of his relationship with Mary due to her past scandals and promiscuity, and they blamed her for Tarleton's current financial predicament. His mother gave Tarleton an ultimatum. She would only give him the money to pay off his debts if he were to break up with Mary. As his mother wrote to him in a letter, "See your follies in their real light and become a new man." I must add before I conclude this letter that it will give me real pleasure and satisfaction to hear that your connection with Mrs. Robinson is at an end. Without that necessary step, all my endeavors to save you from impending destruction will be ineffectual. Tarleton, unwilling to leave Mary, but also knowing his financial situation was nearing dire, was immobilized by fear and dread. As he wrote to his brother in an exasperated letter, "I am at a loss as to what to do and what to say." Tarleton's refusal to leave Mary, despite his family's pleas, may have been in part due to the fact that Mary became pregnant with his child around this time. When Tarleton told Mary about his mother's ultimatum, she became sick with worry. Of course, she did not want Tarleton to end up in debtor's prison, but she could also not bear the thought of once again losing the love of her life at the demand of his family. When that June, Mary learned that Tarleton would be forced to leave England if he did not immediately pay off his debt, she desperately reached out to all of her contacts for a loan. Somewhat ironically, it was Fox, who she remained on good terms with, who agreed to lend her the money. That evening, Mary had plans to meet Tarleton at the opera. She was anxious to relay the good news that she had secured him the money he needed to pay off his debts. When Tarleton did not arrive at her house to pick her up, Mary felt a pit in her stomach. She rushed to the opera house, but Tarleton was nowhere to be found. Panicked, Mary searched his home and got word that Tarleton had escaped to Dover. In the dead of night and without properly dressing herself, Mary immediately got into her carriage and demanded to be driven to Dover as quickly as possible. The night's air was particularly chill, and a few hours into her journey, Mary became severely ill. As an early biographer of Mary wrote, "With passion and zeal, Mrs. Robinson, between 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, threw herself in a post-chaise to follow Tarleton without sufficient precaution of dress against the cold, although it was the depth of winter and the weather was very severe. she was agitated and heated by her apprehensions and let down the glasses of the chaise, and in that situation fell asleep. She was obliged to be carried into an inn, almost frozen. It is believed that the shock of the cold caused Mary to miscarry while in the carriage. To make matters worse, a resulting streptococcal infection from the miscarriage caused her to develop rheumatic fever, which eventually led to advanced rheumatism and left her lower body permanently paralyzed. Mary was taken to a nearby inn where she remained confined to bed for over 6 months. As the biographer continued, from that hour she never recovered the entire use of her limbs. For a long time the joints of her fingers were contracted, but they were afterwards partially restored, and she could write with faculty. But from the time of that accident, she could never walk or even stand, and was always carried from one room to another, and to and from her carriage. At just 25 years old, Mary's life was forever changed within the blink of an eye. Not only did she tragically lose her unborn child, but she also completely lost mobility of her lower body. Once praised as the most stunning woman of her age, Mary was now, in the words of author Paula Byrne, reduced to a state of more than infantile helplessness. After 6 months of being bedridden, Mary had finally recovered enough to return to London. And one of the first things she did upon her return was sit for a second portrait by Sir Joshua Reynolds, who was not only her preferred portraitist, but had quickly become one of her dearest friends. Painted just a year apart from his first portrait of Mary, here Reynolds depicts a noticeably changed woman. Mary is no longer pictured as the stylish and confident socialite she once was, but rather a forlorn and wistful woman looking out longingly at a stormy sea. Instead of making direct eye contact, Mary turns away from us, her eyes now downcast in sorrow. Unlike her previous portraits, which picture Mary in ostentatious outfits, here, Mary wears only a modest white dress. As a contemporary critic wrote of her portrait, her aspect is melancholy itself. Her hair is disordered, and her attire is simple. The scene of landscape and water is introduced to illustrate the character and give the portrait a depressed state of mind. The stormy sea not only reflects Mary's inner turmoil, but alludes to her lost lover, Tarleton, who had recently absconded to evade his financial troubles, and left Mary abandoned in the process. Though she had grown to resent her nickname Perdita, here Mary is in every aspect the lost one. She had lost her lover, their child, and her mobility, and with it, her independence to move freely amongst society. As author Paula Byrne wrote, Mary and Reynolds together appear to have devised the composition of a portrait alluding to her changed life. Just a year later, Mary was no longer concerned with projecting an image of self-assurance and attractiveness. In Reynolds's raw portrait of her, Mary is brave enough to showcase her vulnerabilities. Reynolds would remain Mary's close ally and friend until he passed away in 1792. He kept this portrait of Mary with him as a prized possession for the rest of his life. Though back in London, Mary remained confined to her bed for the entirety of that year. Once London's it girl, Mary was now rarely seen in public. To make matters worse, her financial debt once again began to accumulate, and she was constantly harassed by creditors and moneylenders. But there was some good news on the horizon. Tarleton, who had not escaped to Dover as Mary had thought, but had gone to Southampton, was now returning to London. Tarleton did not learn of Mary's unfortunate fate for a few months. He had assumed that she had stayed in London, and that his leave had marked the end of their relationship. When Tarleton heard that Mary had not only chased after him, but had subsequently suffered a health crisis with permanent damage, he was beside himself. That March, when he was offered a position as a politician in London, he jumped on the opportunity to be reunited with Mary. Upon his return, Tarleton immediately moved in with Mary, and Mary was delighted to once again be in his company. After the hardest year of her life, she finally had her greatest love's company and support. Unfortunately, Mary was not able to celebrate Tarleton's return for long. Her financial troubles became so severe that she was forced to auction off most of her belongings. When it became clear that Mary would have to file for bankruptcy, she made the tough decision to leave the country. By leaving, she would not only evade the law, but she could focus on her health, as there were many reputable sanatoriums outside of England where she could seek treatment. On August 5, 1784, Mary, joined by Tarleton, her mother, and her daughter, left London for Paris. As the local newspapers reported, Mrs. Robinson has been obliged to leave England for the continent for the recovery of her health. She has lost almost the use of her limbs, and upon her journey was lifted in and out of her carriage. Her disorder is rheumatic, of so obstinate a nature that her recovery is doubtful. Mary arrived in Paris weak and almost completely broke. We do not know how Mary spent these first few weeks in Paris, but we do know that she traveled to a health spa in Germany a little while later to receive treatment for her rheumatism. Accompanied by Tarleton, Mary not only experienced improved health, but was thrilled to be able to spend such quality time with her love out of the public's eye. In fact, Mary's daughter later described these months as the happiest in all of Mary's life. And Tarleton and Mary not only worked on rebuilding and strengthening their relationship, but also on a joint writing project. It was during these months that Mary helped Tarleton write his book, History of the Campaigns in Virginia and the Neighboring Provinces, a memoir of his time in the American Revolutionary War. In fact, it's believed that Mary in reality did the majority of the writing, while Tarleton dictated stories to her. The book was published in 1787, while Mary and Tarleton were still abroad, and received raving reviews. By January of 1788, Mary had recovered enough to make her way back to England. And upon her return, she was ready to do more than just co-write other people's projects. She wanted to dedicate herself to her own writing career. Mary's commitment to writing was in many ways a result of her health challenges and resulting partial paralysis. Now confined to her house, Mary made the most of her changed situation by harnessing the power of her mind and pouring herself into her poetry. If she could no longer be London's fashionable it girl at the center of every popular event, then she would reinvent herself and be taken seriously as both a writer and intellectual. As the novelist Jane Porter wrote of Mary, she made a conscious decision at this time to spurn the great and the good in favor of the secluded literary life. She now dedicated all of her time to the culture of her understanding, and in the epoch of her life, when her loveliness shone in its brightest perfection, she secluded herself for hours and days and weeks, has remained there, studying how to become wiser and better. And as Mary's daughter recalled, even under so severe calamity, the powers of her mind and the elasticity of her spirits triumphed over the weakness of her frame. This check to the pleasures and vivacity of youth by depriving her of external resources, led her to the most assiduous cultivation and development of her talents. Within a few months of her return, Mary began to publish poems in the world, testing waters by publishing under a pseudonym, Laura, inspired by the famed female character of Petrarch's poetry. After receiving favorable reviews, Mary changed her pen name to Laura Maria and was more open about her true identity. Her poems were so popular that Mary eventually became the house poet for The Oracle, and her success with The Oracle soon caught the attention of a publisher, who offered to publish a new book of Mary's poems. The volume was officially published a year later, in May of 1791, and received extraordinary praise from the press. As the Monthly Review declared, "This ingenious and celebrated lady has attracted the attention of the public, both by her personal charms and her mental accomplishments, and who can withstand the united powers of beauty and wit?" And the Analytical Review wrote, "The picture of the fair writer's mind portrayed in these poems will long outlive the portrait of her person, though drawn by Reynolds." Mary was particularly proud that this review praised the prowess of her mind over her physical beauty. And her poetry volume was only the beginning of what would become a prolific and productive writing career. In February of 1792, Mary published her first novel, Vicenza. Vicenza is a Gothic romance loosely based on Mary's own life and relationship with the Prince of Wales. But at its core, Vicenza is a defense of women, pointing out the many challenges women face to uphold their reputation in a society built for them to fail. In a passionate passage from the novel, Mary writes, "There is nothing so difficult to preserve as female reputation. As it is rare, it creates universal envy. Those who possess it, proud of the treasure, often become its detractors, merely because they cannot break the presumption of a rival. How ridiculous is the woman that conceived a single perfection, which benefits no living creature but herself, sufficient to counterbalance the total want of every social virtue. Small is the trump of chastity that has never been assailed by the cunning of the seducer. A woman places her reputation in the power of an undeserving object. She is no longer mistress of her own happiness." Vicenza was an instant hit with the public and a literal overnight sensation, as every single copy of the book sold within the first 24 hours of its release. Demand was so high that Mary's publishers eventually had to publish 5 separate editions, just to have enough copies for its sale. As author Paula Byrne brilliantly points out, the fact that the novel sold out is testament not only to Mary's skill as an author, but also her skill in tapping into a lucrative market and bringing to it the added value of her celebrated name. Critics enjoyed the novel just as much as the public did, and it received glowing reviews from every major newspaper. In fact, Vicenza broke a record for the most acclaimed and best-selling novel ever written by a female author of Mary's time. And Mary was declared by many as the greatest female author to ever write in the English language. Though Mary continued to suffer from severe rheumatism, her burgeoning writing career kept her spirits high. As her daughter later remembered, the mind of Mrs. Robinson, beguiled by these pursuits from preying upon itself, became gradually reconciled to the calamitous state of her health. The mournful certainty of total and incurable lameness, while yet in the bloom of life, was alleviated by the consciousness of intellectual resource. But despite Mary's immense success as an author, she barely made any profit from her writing, and she was still burdened with consistent debt. It was also around this time that Mary discovered Tarleton had begun an affair with another woman. To evade both her debt and now also her broken heart, Mary decided to once again leave England for France, despite her extremely frail health. As she wrote to a friend, "I am suffered to depart in exile from my country, and all my hopes for a few paltry debts. I sail this evening for Calais alone, broken-hearted, and without 20 pounds on the face of this earth. My state of health is too deplorable to bear description, totally lame and depressed in spirits beyond what my strength can support. To be thus driven a wanderer upon the mercy of an unfeeling world." Mary remained in France for a few months. She returned to England in September of 1792, her body so weak that she barely survived the voyage. But it was incredibly lucky that Mary left France when she did. On the very day of her leave, France ordered that any British subject were to be arrested, and thousands of royalists were publicly slaughtered in Paris, in what would be known as the September Massacres. Upon hearing the news, Mary must have pinched herself. Had she delayed her trip just a matter of a few hours, she may have fallen to the same tragic fate. To celebrate, Mary reunited with Tarleton, who apologized for his infidelity and promised to remain faithful to Mary here on out. But Mary hardly had much time to rejoice. Soon after her return, it became clear that her mother's health had rapidly declined, and tragically, in August of 1793, her mother passed away. Mary was utterly devastated with grief. She and her mother had been bonded since her father left them in Mary's early childhood. She had barely left her mother's side since. Mary would mourn the loss of her mother for the rest of her life. As her daughter later recalled, "Even to the latest hour of her life, her grief appeared renewed when an object presented itself connected with the memory of her departed mother." Not new to tragedy, Mary had learned how to persevere through the hardest of circumstances, and she turned to her writing to work through her grief. In January of 1794, Mary published her third volume of poems, which included her most personal poems to date. She also published her second novel, A Picture of Modern Times, which exposed the follies of fashionable society. The book was yet again a defense of women, this time defending women who had no choice but to use their sexuality to survive in an often unforgiving world. As Mary wrote in a heartfelt passage, "We are all subject to error. Let those who censure examine their own hearts. There are women who have had no opportunities to wander from the paths of propriety, driven upon the mercy of an unfeeling world, young, beautiful, stricken with poverty, shrinking under oppression, assailed by flattery, and allured by splendor. Surely, the most obdurate heart must sigh for such a wanderer and confess that if a thing can palliate indiscretion, it is the combination of such circumstances." It was during this time that Mary also wrote her first script for the theater, a comedy called Nobody, which was performed on Drury Lane, the same stage she herself had once graced. Nobody was another jab at high society. As a critic of the time wrote, the object of this piece was to place in proper ridicule the follies and vices of fashionable life. It was also intended to show how easily a reputation may be lost. And Mary continued to publish poems in not only the Oracle, but also the Morning Post. By 1795, Mary was widely acknowledged and respected as a female author whose work came in many forms, and a celebrated intellectual. After all these years, Mary was finally known for her own accomplishments and merit. and not just as the mistress of a famous man. We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
Lowe's knows that saving is always top of mind, especially this season. That's why we've picked some great deals for early Black Friday. Get free select DeWalt, Cobalt, or Craftsman tools when you buy a select battery or combo kit. More tools? Why not? Plus, we've got select pre-lit artificial Christmas trees starting at $59.98 because it's never too early to think Christmas. Get Black Friday prices without the crowds. Lowe's, we help, you save. While supplies last, selection varies by location.
At Capella University, we believe accessible education can make a difference in people's lives. That's why we offer scholarship opportunities to all eligible students. Whether you're considering a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, our teams will walk you through the process and help you get the savings you're eligible for. Furthering your education is an investment in yourself. Entonces, ¿qué estás esperando? Un futuro diferente está más cerca de lo que crees con Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Hey neighbor, celebrate the holidays with Birch Lane. Our timeless furniture and decor are delivered for free in days, not weeks. It's classic style for joyful living. Shop Birch Lane, a Wayfair specialty brand at birchlane.com.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in. As Mary's career as a writer became more established, she became acquainted with like-minded scholars and philosophers, who inspired Mary to become more radical in her beliefs. As Mary radicalized, she began to publish works both in defense of women's rights as well as calling for the abolition of slavery. In one powerful poem called Captivity, Mary calls out the brutality of slave owners and pleads for the return of humanity. Her calls to end slavery in particular created immense tension between Mary and Tarleton, whose family was still deeply involved in slave trading. In fact, Tarleton often spoke publicly in support of slavery. Tarleton grew increasingly agitated by Mary's radicalized view, and Mary increasingly disgusted by Tarleton's backward mentality. As their differences became more difficult for either of them to bear, Mary and Tarleton finally decided to permanently part ways in 1796, after a 15-year-long tumultuous relationship. To process their breakup, Mary wrote the novel The False Friend in 1799, a book undeniably about her relationship with Tarleton. In The False Friend, the female protagonist's lover is unfaithful and untrustworthy in the end. As one supportive review read, a certain general would be entirely forgotten, but that false friend will forever be remembered. The False Friend is, as author Paula Burns so eloquently wrote, Mary's own testament that Tarleton leaving her did her a favor by showing her that she did not need a man. Instead, their breakup radicalized Mary all the more and propelled her to become one of the leading feminists of her day. It was shortly after her breakup with Tarleton that Mary wrote her own feminist manifesto. Titled A Letter to the Women of England on the Injustice of Mental Subordination, Mary attacks and exposes the many laws and societal standards that diminish and belittle women's self-authority and power. She calls for an end of marital laws that make a woman's property her husband's upon marriage. She criticizes the double standard that men with multiple sexual partners are often applauded, while women are written off as scandalous and loose. The unfair exclusion of women from seats of power, such as Parliament, and the absurd notion that because men are physically stronger, that they are overall superior to women. She also argues that women should not be, in the words of Mary herself, mere appendages of domestic life, but the partners, the equal associates of men. As Mary wrote, "Let me ask this plain and rational question. Is not woman a human being, gifted with all the feelings that inhabit the bosom of man? If a woman be the weaker creature, why is she employed in laborious avocations? Why compelled to endure the fatigue of household drudgery, to scrub, to scour, to labor, both late and early, while the powdered lackey only waits at the chair or behind the carriage of his employer? Why are women in parts of the kingdom permitted to follow the plow, to perform the laborious business of the dairy, to work in our manufactories, to wash, to brew, and to bake, while men are employed in measuring lace, folding gauzes, and mixing cosmetics for the preservation of beauty? Are women thus compelled to labor because they are the weaker sex?" Instead, Mary declares the need for better education for women, calls for more legal protection for women in marital contracts, and asks for the end of holding women to unattainable societal standards. To support her points, Mary even provided a list of 39 powerful women from history, going all the way back to ancient Rome. As Mary exclaims, "Let your daughters be liberally, classically, philosophically, and usefully educated. Let them speak and write their opinions freely. Let them read and think like rational creatures, adapt their studies to the strength of their intellect, expand their minds." The following year, Mary published a series of poems titled Lyrical Tales, a collection that focuses on the injustice of misogyny, domestic violence, and wrongful political persecution. What Mary did not know at the time was that Lyrical Tales would be her last collection of poems to be published during her lifetime. As Paula Byrne wrote, Robinson's last work pleads for a recognition of the moral and rational worth of women. It was also around this time that Mary became the poetry editor of the Morning Post, one of the first women to have such a prestigious role within the newspaper. Now Mary not only contributed her own work, but was the one to select submissions from other writers. She also rallied behind the addition of a fashion column in the Morning Post, which she remained involved in. But in 1800, she began her most meaningful project to date, her own autobiography. As Mary's physical condition declined, Mary put her energy towards writing her own memoirs. This was largely to have the opportunity to tell her own story and set her record straight, especially when it came to her early years as the prince's mistress. She sought to rectify her reputation and correct early biographies of her, which scandalized and sensationalized her relationship with the prince. Instead, Mary wanted to defend herself as a victim of both misogyny and deception, and to shift the public's focus from her relationship with the prince to her later years as a literary genius. As author Paula Byrne wrote, in writing her autobiography, there were two conflicting impulses at work. On the one hand, she needed to revisit her own youthful notoriety. She had been the most wronged woman in England, and she wanted to put on record her side of the story of her relationship with the Prince of Wales. But at the same time, she wanted to be remembered as a completely different character, a woman of letters and as a woman of genius. In writing her own autobiography, Mary was hoping to achieve both goals: to tell her own version of her eventful life and to ensure her legacy as one of the leading authors of her day. Knowing that her end was likely near, Mary wasted no time in recording her own personal history. As she opens her memoirs, how little has the misjudging world known of what has passed in my mind. Probably these pages will be read when the hand that writes them moulders in the grave, when that God who judges all hearts will know how innocent I was of the smallest conjugal infidelity. From the start, Robinson portrays herself as a melancholic character, going as far back as the stormy night on which she was born. She blames the many men in her life for the majority of her life's troubles: her father's abandonment of their family, her husband's lies and infidelity, the prince's false promises, and Tarleton's selfish and backwards ways. But in her autobiography, Mary makes sure that she is the heroine of her own story, a woman who has turned the many tragedies of her life into her greatest accomplishments. By 1800, Mary had been suffering from the effects of rheumatism for over 11 years. But by that spring, her health began to more rapidly decline. This was made worse by Mary's refusal to slow down with work. Not only did she continue to act as the poetry editor of the Morning Post, but she began drafting a 4-part essay on societal manners and decorum. As Mary admitted to a friend in a letter, "I work too hard and too incessantly at my pen to recover rapidly, and to say truly, I very little value life, therefore perhaps am neglectful of those attentions which are calculated to prolong it." Mary's insistence to continue working was not only to stimulate her insatiable curiosity, but to pay off her debts, which had only increased over the years, despite her immense success as a writer. Eventually, Mary's health issues grew so severe that she had to move outside of London to a cottage in the countryside. Here, Mary enjoyed peace and solitude from the outside world. As Mary wrote, "I have grown into the perfect misanthrope, and am almost determined never again to mingle with the gay and busy world. After all, the common routine of society is so full of thorns, and so bestowed with weeds. I begin to hate the world. I feel no sensation but that of disgust. I enjoy no pleasure but that of looking on past felicity. I have outlived health, youth, and happiness, then welcome solitude and musing melancholy." As if returning to her early years as a broody and independent child, Mary preferred to live out the last months of her life alone with her own thoughts. By that fall, Mary's health was so fragile that she knew that she had little time left. As she faced her end, Mary wrote in one of her last letters, "I am strongly impressed with a presentiment that my days are nearly numbered, but I am happier, more tranquil, more gay than when I dreaded a long life of suffering." Though she was sharply declining, Mary tried her best to keep a brave face for her daughter. As Paula Byrne wrote, "When no longer able to support the fatigue of being removed from her chamber, she retained perfect composure of spirits, and in the intervals of extreme bodily suffering, would listen while her daughter read to her with apparent interest and collectedness of thought, frequently making observations on what would probably take place when she passed that place whence no traveler returns." And though physically Mary's health was failing, Mary's daughter later attested that her mind remained sharp up until the end. As her daughter wrote, "Her mind seemed to acquire strength in proportion to the weakness of her frame." In fact, one of Mary's last wishes was for her daughter to publish her autobiography after she had passed. Using all her strength, she handed her memoir over and whispered, "Promise me you will print it." As she continued to decline, all of Mary's remaining thoughts were of her daughter, who she had once described as her adored and affectionate second self. Mary worried about her daughter's well-being when she would no longer be there to take care of her. Her daughter assured her that Mary had taught her to be a strong and independent woman, and that Mary would always live on in her heart. Mary's most significant symptom as she neared death was the accumulation of water in her lungs and chest. To prevent suffocation, Mary had to sleep propped up with her back against the wall. She spent 15 agonizing days like this. Miraculously, she was able to celebrate one final Christmas with her daughter, so weak that she could barely keep her eyes open. But just a few hours later, Mary began to cry in pain. "Oh God, oh just and merciful God, help me to support this agony." As she took her final breaths, she managed to turn to her daughter and whisper, "My darling Maria." These were Mary's last words before she fell into a coma and passed away on December 26, 1800. Mary was only 43 years old. At the request of her doctors, Mary was given an autopsy. As the final report read, "On the body being opened by the express wish of the physicians who attended her, the immediate cause of death was found to be an accumulation of water on the chest, together with 6 large stones contained in the gallbladder. These were symptoms of her long battle with rheumatism, which weakened her body greatly over time. As she had requested, Mary had a small funeral, with only her daughter and a few friends in attendance. She was buried just down the road from her cottage, in the churchyard of St. Peter and St. Andrew Church. Though her funeral was kept small, Mary did receive eulogies in the press, most notably from the Morning Post, where she had worked for the last years of her life. As the Morning Post wrote, "In her last moments, she was consoled by the tender affections of her daughter and many friends, who deeply lament that a woman of such genius, of such elegant taste, of so rich an imagination in poetry, should be cut off at a period when the mental faculties are in their prime. As the authoress of several popular novels and poetical pieces, she was well known to the public, who would have been still further indebted to her pen if she had been blessed with life and health." And the famed author Jane Porter also dedicated a touching eulogy to Mary. As she wrote, "I will remember Mrs. Robinson, that I admired her talents, that I pitied her sufferings, that I loved her virtues, that I forgot her errors, that I visited her, that I wrote to her, that she called me her sweet friend." As promised, Mary's daughter published Mary's autobiography titled Memoirs of the Late Mrs. Robinson, written by herself, in 1801. Not much is known of Maria Elizabeth's later life. We do know that she passed away in 1818, at a similar age as Mary, and that she was buried alongside Mary in the same tomb. Just as Mary had slept with baby Maria Elizabeth many years earlier, mother and daughter would rest eternally side by side. Despite Maria Elizabeth's best efforts to keep her mother's legacy alive, Mary fell into relative obscurity in the years following her death, and her many important literary works were largely erased from history. Even her portrait by Gainsborough was retitled Portrait of a Lady with a Dog by the Victorian era. In fact, Mary herself was all too aware of the unjust erasure of women from history. As she once wrote, "There is no country on the habitable globe which can produce so many exalted and illustrious women as England. And yet we see many of them living in obscurity, known only by their writings. We hear of no national honors, no public marks of popular applause, no rank, no title, no liberal and splendid recompense bestowed on British literary women." And when Mary was remembered, it was far too often for her public affairs than for her impressive and prolific career as a writer and activist. Mary is one of countless other women whose intellectual achievements have been undermined by society's obsession over their sex lives. But more recently, there has been a resurgence of interest in Mary Robinson. Mary's early advocacy for women's rights caught the attention of feminists in the 1990s. She has since been the subject of several biographies, most notably Paula Byrne's biography, published in 2005, which became a top 10 bestseller. A new edition of Mary Robinson's complete works was published in 2010, and in 2011, Daniel Robinson published a monograph of Mary Robinson's poetry. In 2024, Chawton House held an entire exhibition centered on Mary titled Mary Robinson, Actress, Mistress, Writer, Radical. And her portraits by Gainsborough, Reynolds, and Romney are now some of the most beloved works in the Wallace Collection in London, admired by thousands of visitors a year. But in today's episode, we aim to further Mary's legacy by honoring her as the brilliant, fearless, and forward-thinking woman she was. As an actress, society woman, fashion icon, and entertainer, turned author, intellectual, feminist, and abolitionist. As a woman who not only overcame unimaginable tragedies, but transformed them into her greatest strengths. As the curator of Chawton House, Emma Yandel, wrote, Mary Robinson might be the most famous woman you've never heard of, who could be described as the first modern celebrity. She was a great beauty and muse to the top society artists of the day, while simultaneously being savaged in the press for her romantic life. However, off the back of this infamy, she managed to forge a successful career as a writer. Throughout her career, we see her resisting the limiting definitions foisted upon her at the onset of her life. She was an active agent in her life story, who carefully fashioned her identity to reputational ends. Mary's success as an actress and performer is not to be overlooked. Mary first became famous as a star of Drury Lane through the merit of her own talent. From her debut as Juliet in 1776 to her famous performance as Perdita that caused the Prince of Wales to fall madly in love with her, Mary dazzled her audiences every time she walked onto the stage. At the height of her career, she was being paid the top rate for actresses of her time and enjoyed financial independence. It was all too unfortunate that Mary's career was ultimately affected by the demanding men in her life, delayed at first by her husband, Tom Robinson, and ended far too soon at the request of the Prince of Wales. Though her time as an actress was cut short, Mary left a lasting legacy on Drury Lane. And her affair with the prince, though ultimately disappointing, was undeniably remarkable by nature. That a woman who had just recently been released from a debtor's prison captured the heart of the heir to the throne of England is near astonishing. And even then, Mary kept herself cool, calm, and collected, resisting the prince's advances for several months. It was only when he made her an offer of £20,000 that she gave in and began an affair with him. And it should also be noted that the prince did not want to end his relationship with Mary on his own accord. It was only when his father threatened his future as king that the prince cut Mary off. And even when Mary was left high and dry, not only abandoned by the prince, but refused the payment he promised her, Mary made the best of her situation. She enacted her revenge by having her portrait painted by not one, but 4 of the leading painters of her day, and some of the most famous artists in all of art history, including Sir Joshua Reynolds, Thomas Gainsborough, and George Romney. As Paula Byrne rightfully points out, few women of her age had as great an understanding as she did of her own selling power. She knew how to manipulate her personal image and harness the insatiable public interest in her private life to her own advantage. And that's exactly what Mary did. Even after her breakup with the prince, Mary transformed herself into one of the first female celebrities of the early modern age. As Byrne continued, Mary became notorious for her self-promotion and her skill in anticipating the next new thing. But she also grasped the very essence of urban culture in the late 18th century. She knew that in order to survive and thrive in the new customer society, she had to work to sell her wares. It took guts, brashness, and ostentation to make your voice heard, especially if you were a woman. After her breakup with the prince, Mary not only worked her public image, but continued to date impressive and powerful men. She had a fling with the prominent Whig leader, Charles James Fox, and began a long and tumultuous relationship with the notorious war hero, Tarleton. Unfortunately, Tarleton turned out to be just as addicted to gambling as Mary's husband, and he landed himself in significant debt. When he fled the country without notice, Mary chased after Tarleton in the middle of the night, a decision that would have severe and irreversible consequences. Mary not only suffered a miscarriage, but developed rheumatic fever, which eventually left her lower body permanently disabled. Once London's hottest it girl, Mary's life had drastically changed overnight, and she would never be able to walk again. But while many might recoil in defeat, Mary faced her changed circumstances head-on and made the most of her new reality. Now bedridden, Mary returned to her early passion for writing. Over the course of the next many years, Mary became one of the most well-respected and prolific writers of her day. As the British journalist Piers Egan once wrote, "As an authoress, few, if any, have risen higher in literary fame or have maintained a more solid and permanent reputation than the distinguished Perdita. Her talents were not limited, and the wide and extensive range she took in the field of literature not only astonished the most acute, delighted the refined and elegant, but extorted approbation from the rigid and scrutinizing critics. When Mary lost her ability to use her body freely, she harnessed the power of her mind and reinvented herself as a woman of letters. And as she grew older, Mary's writing turned more and more radical, using her growing platform to advocate for both women's rights and the abolition of slavery. Her pioneering and courageous efforts to put forth feminist ideology carved the way for future generations of women to come. Perdita, the nickname that haunted Mary throughout her life, translates to the lost one. And it might sound like an appropriate name for Mary, who had lost so much in her life, including her ability to walk. But in her loss, she found her greatest power, that of her mind, and harnessed her mental strength to fiercely fight for a better world. In the end, Mary was not the lost one at all, because her losses led to her greatest life's achievements, and the world gained one of the most brilliant writers of all of modern history. I hope you have enjoyed ArtMuse's two-part episode on Mary Robinson. I have included images, resources, and suggestions for further reading on the ArtMuse website and Instagram. ArtMuse is produced by Kula Production Company. Today's episode was written by me, your host, Grace Anna. Stay tuned as I continue to share the stories of the women behind some of the world's most important works of art. Until next time, bye for now.
At Capella University, we believe accessible education can make a difference in people's lives. That's why we offer scholarship opportunities to all eligible students. Whether you're considering a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, our teams will walk you through the process and help you get the savings you're eligible for. Furthering your education is an investment in yourself. Entonces, ¿qué estás esperando? Un futuro diferente está más cerca de lo que crees con Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Hey everybody, it's Babs. You know, one thing that makes the holiday season so magical is the traditions we share year after year. And that's why I'm so excited to tell you about Birch Lane. Their classic furniture and festive decor is carefully crafted to bring joy to every seasonal celebration. Plus, it's delivered fast and free, so you can start spreading the holiday cheer. Shop my hand-picked Birch Lane collection and more classic styles at birchlane.com.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.